Imagine a time when the world teetered on a knife's edge, when continents convulsed with the thunder of mechanized war, and the skies over Europe darkened beneath the wings of Nazi bombers. It is May 28, 1940, Berlin. The marble-clad halls of the Reich Air Ministry echo with the dismissive scoff of Reich Marshal Hermann Göring as he flings down an intelligence report bearing the seal of the United States. Its contents: President Franklin Roosevelt's audacious plea to Congress that America tool its factories to churn out 50,000 warplanes yearly, are met with sneers. "Let them try," Göring growls, jaded by arrogance. "They know nothing of war production. Let the Americans convert their idle automobile plants. They will learn that building aircraft isn't child's play." What he cannot see, what none in that gilded chamber seem able to comprehend, is that America's slumbering industrial giant has begun to stir. As Roosevelt's words electrify American airwaves, "I should like to see this nation geared up to turn out at least 50,000 planes a year." German panzers roll inexorably across France. The world holds its breath. To many, Roosevelt's challenge rings outlandish, even impossible. In 1939, the United States manufactured a pitiful 3,611 military airplanes. Of these, the Army Air Corps possesses fewer than 2,000 capable of combat, a force overshadowed by the Luftwaffe's steel flocks. But America breeds faith in the improbable. While the world doubts, a Danish immigrant named William S. Knudsen, a man who had risen from apprentice to president of General Motors, is summoned to Washington. At Roosevelt's behest, Knudsen abandons a princely salary, accepting the symbolic $1 a year government post. His task is unthinkable: transform a peaceful nation into history's mightiest arsenal. America's genius is not rooted in militarism, but in mass production, in the whirring ballet of steel, rubber, and engines. Its identity is etched on factory floors, from the Ford Model T's moving assembly line to skyscrapers of Detroit's Motor City. The potential slumbers within millions of blue-collar hands, a cathedral of steel and sweat. Knudsen knows this power intimately. He brings an ethic forged in competition, honed on the relentless pace of automotive manufacture. When Roosevelt's advisors fret over whom to entrust with national survival, one answer resounds: Knudsen first, Knudsen second, Knudsen third. Knudsen sees what Göring cannot. Battlefields are decided as much by rivets as rifles. War is a crucible where nations that master production shape history's verdict. Roosevelt's vision does not ignite enthusiasm in all quarters. Many Americans, still haunted by World War I's scars, doubt both need and feasibility. Congress reveals skepticism. Isolationists warn of foreign entanglements. Allies question American resolve, their faith worn thin by slow arms deliveries and obsolete materiel. Factories remain programmed for peacetime. Automobile plants churn out coupes and sedans. Assembly lines are strangers to machine guns and bomb sites. The Army Air Corps struggles with biplanes at the edge of obsolescence. Skeptics abound, even among the president's most trusted circle. But American industry is a canvas for reinvention. Knudsen's first moves are subtle yet seismic. Survey every plant, chart every supplier, count every craftsman. He implores Detroit's captains, Henry Ford, William Chrysler, Charles Sorensen, to imagine their factories not as manufacturers of cars, but as the ramparts of freedom itself. Beyond America's shores, the Axis advance seems unstoppable. Nazi U-boats prowl the Atlantic. Luftwaffe bombers devastate Rotterdam and Warsaw. British and French intelligence quietly warn their embassies. If America does not act, darkness may engulf the globe. Some within the German High Command see shadows of American potential. General Friedrich von Boeticker, the Reich's military attaché in Washington, cables headquarters throughout 1940. American war production will reach unimaginable heights. His messages are dismissed as defeatist paranoia, lost in a fog of ideology and contempt. Hitler himself sneers. Americans are mongrels, half Judaized, half negrified, fit only for jazz, not war. Göring's staff echo this prejudice, declaring reports of women in airplane plants as evidence of desperation. But the winds in Detroit are shifting. Knudsen convenes the titans of Detroit in an unadorned office crowded with blueprints and production schedules. He speaks plainly. "You know how to build anything. Build me engines, wings, fuselages, propellers. Build me more than the world has ever seen." Henry Ford, skeptical but intrigued, issues a fateful bet. "If we're going to build airplanes, let's build them like automobiles, by the thousands." Plans for enormous new plants are unfurled. Committees dispatch teams to dissect engine blueprints, procure aluminum, and retrofit stamping presses into war machines. The language of mass production, subassemblies, interchangeability, flow lines, infuses military vocabulary. The city's heartbeat quickens. Steel shipments triple. Rubber convoys snake through city streets. By the end of 1940, contracts for thousands of bombers and fighters are inked. Factories retool overnight. A sense of destiny, uneasy but relentless, takes hold. Mobilizing for war is not merely an act of engineering, but a colossal act of organization. The nascent War Production Board wrestles with competing priorities: tanks versus bombers, ships versus trucks. Supply chains stretch across a continent. In every corner, bottlenecks loom. Copper shortages, labor disputes, shipping delays. Knudsen's solution is elegant: decentralize and empower. Give skilled managers autonomy to solve problems, reporting directly to Washington. Bureaucracy that cannot learn dies. Knudsen is the fixer-in-chief, wielding common sense and a ledger. Crucially, Knudsen sees that morale is as important as machinery. He campaigns for patriotism on factory floors. "This is your war. Build like your sons are flying these planes," he urges. Every revolution begins with individuals. In Detroit, men habitually bent over chassis and transmissions find their calloused hands assembling Wright Cyclone engines and reskinning B-24 bombers. Machinists, tool and die specialists, and factory foremen, most of whom never traveled beyond Michigan, suddenly see their labor mapped onto world history. Women begin appearing in coveralls, pushing against centuries of tradition. The earliest Rosies rivet metal, solder circuits, and inspect precision parts. Their numbers are small, their courage immense. Immigrants, Polish, Italian, Hungarian, African American, all become the threads in America's assembly line tapestry. They may struggle with language, but the ethos of hard work binds them to the nation's fate. Quietly, imperceptibly, change accelerates. By January 1941, American output has begun to creep upward. Factories increasingly run 2, then 3 shifts. Night becomes day in Detroit, Cleveland, and Seattle, the glare of floodlights illuminating the new army of workers. Aircraft once taking months to build now roll off lines weekly. Rumors flow back to Berlin. Boetticker's final warnings go unheeded. As Roosevelt's impossible goal inches toward possibility, the world is about to witness an industrial resurrection, and Göring's contempt will seed his own doom. As this first chapter closes, America stands at the brink, not of war's destruction, but of war's transformation. The idea has taken root. Production is power, and in the coming storm, it will not be generals or philosophers who shape the future, but mechanics, foundrymen, and assembly line workers. The arsenal of democracy is still a promise, not yet a reality. But the machinery of history is turning, and what emerges in the years ahead will redefine not only warfare, but the very nature of national power. May 1941 was a turning point in the grand saga of industrial mobilization that would define the Second World War. While Europe remained entangled in bloodshed and German armored divisions advanced with disturbing speed, across the Atlantic, a quieter revolution took shape in the sprawling factories of the United States. It was the moment when mere ambition crystallized into action, the turning of gears that would soon surpass anything the world had ever seen. The birthplace of this transformation was Detroit, a city once known chiefly for its calm assembly lines producing cars for civilian use. These lines now hummed with a new purpose, their rhythm accelerating as new orders flooded in. No longer were they creating vehicles for pleasure or work alone. They were creating the machinery of war. The nation's industrial engine had shifted irrevocably into high gear. Standing at the helm of this upheaval, William S. Knudsen, the Danish immigrant and former titan of General Motors, knitted together a complex web of resources, labor, and innovation. His past experience with mass production gave him an almost prophetic insight into what was required. Not just the quantity of machines, but the seamless synchronization of supply chains stretching from raw material mines to final assembly. Every resource needed to flow without bottleneck. Every worker needed to perform their role in a dance of precision and speed. Immediately, the enormity of the challenge revealed itself. The model that had worked for automobiles required massive adaptation. Assemblies that had once been simple exchanges of parts now necessitated precision engineering. This industrial juggernaut was a reflection of America's democratic ideals. Free workers united under a common purpose exceeded the output of coerced labor and tyrannical directives. This was a battle won not only in the skies, but on the factory floors. Every rivet, every wire, every engine bore the imprint of a nation pledged to its own survival and victory. The Axis had dismissed this European democracy as weak, incapable of total war. History would show their dismissal to be the fatal error that sealed the Third Reich's doom. By early 1942, the war had entered a new phase, and so too had American industry. The devastation wrought by the Axis powers across Europe and the Pacific had galvanized the United States beyond mere mobilization. It was now fully engaged, its factories pulsing with purpose, its people united in a historic campaign to overwhelm tyranny not just on battlefields, but in the factories and assembly lines as well. The transformation was breathtaking. A nation once ill-prepared for war had become an unstoppable industrial colossus. Factories roared to life in cities from coast to coast. The scope of production scale defied belief. Aircraft production soared from a fraction of 1,000 per year to thousands per month. By early 1942, factories were producing more military aircraft monthly than the entire Luftwaffe had at its disposal at the war's outbreak. Central to this unparalleled feat was the Ford Motor Company's Willow Run plant in Michigan. Built from the ground up on farmland starting in 1941, the giant facility was designed to crank out B-24 Liberator bombers at an unprecedented speed. The vision was staggering. One bomber every hour. But the reality at first was brutal. The sheer complexity of the B-24, with hundreds of thousands of parts and intricate assemblies, defied early production hopes. The first completed bombers required rebuilding, and defect rates were shockingly high, up to 50% failure. But Ford's engineers and workers responded with sheer tenacity and innovative spirit. The model of production was revolutionized in real time. The mammoth B-24 was broken down into manageable sub-assemblies, each manufactured simultaneously across the plant's sprawling layout. Hydraulic riveting tools replaced slower manual methods. Wiring harnesses were prefabricated, and assembly lines moved with relentless precision. Each day, improvements were tested and implemented, steadily lowering failure rates and improving quality. By late 1943, Willow Run was churning out more than 360 B-24s monthly. By the spring of 1944, the plant reached a remarkable milestone. A Liberator bomber completed every 63 minutes. This single factory alone was producing more bombers per month than Germany's entire bomber production capacity. It wasn't just a factory. It was an industrial weapon of mass production. And this weapon symbolized more than steel and machine. It embodied the pride and skill of thousands of Americans. Many new to aircraft manufacturing but determined to master the craft. This industrial revolution was not limited to men. Tens of thousands of women streamed into aviation plants, shattering the old notion of who could contribute to the war effort. By 1943, women made up 65% of aircraft industry workers. Their dexterity, patience, and meticulousness helped reduce defect rates and increase output. Iconic figures like Roosevelt Monroe, who riveted 3,000 rivets per shift with a 99.5% accuracy, became the human face of this transformation. Factories redesigned tools and workstations to better suit female workers, unknowingly increasing efficiency across the board. The impact of this workforce diversity was profound. African Americans, Mexican Americans, Native Americans, teenagers, and even elderly citizens found vital roles in production, united by the shared mission of defeating fascism. Voluntary cooperation and democratic team spirit replaced the forced obedience typical of Axis slave labor, creating an environment of innovation and pride. By mid-1942, the American aircraft industry was a multi-headed beast, with facilities spread across the nation. Boeing expanded its Seattle plant, capable of producing 16 B-17 Flying Fortresses daily by 1944. Douglas Aircraft Company, which employed fewer than 70 people in 1936, now had 167,000 workers across 9 plants producing bombers and transports. North American Aviation was mass-producing 500 P-51 Mustangs every month, and Lockheed was delivering a P-38 Lightning every 90 minutes. Supporting industries matched this relentless pace. General Motors built nearly 58,000 aircraft engines under license. Packard manufactured over 55,000 Rolls-Royce Merlin engines, the power plant of the P-51 Mustang. Aluminum production soared, with Alcoa increasing output by 600%. Dow Chemical's magnesium production leapt from 6 million pounds per year to more than 330 million. This vast industrial ecosystem functioned with surgical efficiency, delivering planes, engines, and raw materials in perfect synchronicity. Meanwhile, the German war machine was in denial. Their intelligence services consistently underestimated the speed and scale of American industrial mobilization. Nazi leadership clung to ideological dogma, dismissing women workers and three-shift factory operations as temporary measures doomed to failure. This fatal misjudgment would cost them dearly. Even as Germany resorted to desperate measures, like dispersing production into underground factories manned by forced labor and prisoners, their efficiency plummeted. Sabotage was rampant. Defect rates skyrocketed. Logistics nightmares compounded delays. Horrific working conditions claimed tens of thousands of lives with little to show for it. While America's workers became more skilled and productive, German productivity sank. Back in the United States, innovation didn't pause. Combat experience fed back rapidly to designers and engineers. When the B-17 proved vulnerable to forward attacks, engineers added chin turrets within weeks. When the Pacific Theater demanded greater range, B-24 models were consolidated and modified without halting production lines. This adaptability was unfathomable in the rigid and hierarchical German system. American aircraft themselves evolved. Advanced bomb sights, powered machine gun turrets, and sophisticated navigation equipment became standard. Radios worked reliably. Meanwhile, German fighters often flew with partial ammunition and unreliable radios. The technological gap widened, but it was the industrial gap that sealed Germany's fate. The air war over Europe in late 1943 and 1944 starkly revealed America's production might. The 8th and 15th Air Forces launched massive bombing campaigns, striking German aircraft factories relentlessly. The Luftwaffe bled pilots and planes faster than they could replace. While Germany might produce about 1,000 fighters monthly, America was producing 2,500, losing far fewer in combat. The math was decisive. Germany was losing experienced veteran pilots faster than new ones could be trained. Fuel shortages and bombed factories worsened the situation month by month. German aces described battle scenes almost impossible to believe. Hundreds of American bombers escorted by overwhelming waves of P-51 Mustangs, with German fighters vastly outnumbered and outgunned. By 1944, American aircraft production hit staggering numbers. Nearly 100,000 military aircraft were built that year alone, including 16,000 four-engine bombers, a figure alone exceeding Germany's total wartime aircraft production. German jet fighters, while technologically advanced, were produced in painfully limited numbers and plagued with mechanical unreliability. In contrast, American jet programs simultaneously progressed, albeit more cautiously. The Bell P-59, America's first jet, was inferior to German prototypes, but the Lockheed P-80 Shooting Star would enter production before the war's end, promising the next generation of aerial superiority. American industrial depth allowed parallel development of conventional and cutting-edge aircraft, a luxury Germany could not afford. The consequences of this production juggernaut reached beyond aircraft. Trucks, tanks, weapons. American factories poured out material support across 2 oceans. The logistical achievement was staggering. It was not just about planes in the air, but the ability to supply and sustain vast armies across continents. As Allied bombers darkened the skies of Germany, strategic bombing crippled German industry. Production fell by as much as 35% for tanks, 31% for aircraft, and 42% for trucks. These losses became a spiral of defeat. Fewer weapons, fewer spare parts, fewer trained crews. American industry's relentless output relentlessly squeezed Germany's ability to fight. The aftermath of this industrial tidal wave would not end with victory. It would launch America into a new era of global economic dominance, technological innovation, and societal change. The factories that built B-24s and P-51s would evolve into the automotive, aerospace, and defense industries that defined the post-war world. In reflecting on these events, historians unanimously recognize that the production miracle was the decisive factor in America's victory. The war was won not only on battlefields but on factory floors, where the collective courage and ingenuity of millions forged the arsenal that crushed tyranny. Hermann Göring's initial contempt for American industry, that laughter, had been transformed into a nightmare. The very factories he mocked became the engines of his nation's destruction. The production war was over, and democracy had triumphed with an avalanche of steel, sweat, and unyielding resolve. The year was 1943, and the world was becoming a theater dominated by the engines, sweat, and steel of American industry. The relentless march of factory production reshaped not only the landscape of warfare, but also the very fabric of society. It was a time when the hum of machinery echoed across the nation, crafting an arsenal that no power could match, and forging the blueprint for future technological achievement. Across the United States, the war production effort reached unprecedented scale. More than 2 million Americans were employed in aircraft manufacturing alone, their efforts fueled by a profound sense of purpose and urgency. These workers stood at the nexus of history, transforming raw materials into instruments of victory with ingenuity and tenacity. One of the most iconic achievements was the scale of workforce diversity unprecedented in American industry. Women, African Americans, Mexican Americans, Native Americans, teenagers, and even the elderly joined the ranks of aircraft workers. Their contributions shattered social norms and proved the strength of voluntary collective effort, a cornerstone of democracy. Factory floors once dominated by men welcomed this new generation of workers. Women riveted wings, inspected complex assemblies, and manned precision instruments with skill rivaling and often surpassing their male counterparts. The image of Rosie the Riveter became a symbol of this epochal shift. Meanwhile, the German war effort faced starkly contrasting realities. Increasingly reliant on slave labor and forced conscripts, Nazi Germany struggled with production inefficiencies, sabotage, and collapsing quality control. The sprawling underground production complexes, conceived as salvation, became tombs where tens of thousands perished under horrific conditions, human lives drained with little to show for it. As American factories steadily increased output, Germany's capacity dwindled. The Luftwaffe lost experienced pilots faster than they could be replaced, while Allied air forces fielded staggering numbers of advanced aircraft. The qualitative edge Germany once hoped to maintain through jet technology was eroded by its inability to produce these weapons at scale. The single-minded focus on underground facilities and slave labor only deepened the logistical nightmare and manufacturing bottlenecks. Boeing's monumental assembly lines in Seattle cranked out B-17 flying fortresses in ever-increasing numbers. Douglas aircraft expanded radically, growing from a modest workforce to hundreds of thousands, churning out bombers and transport planes critical for the multiple theaters. North American aviation became synonymous with the P-51 Mustang, a fighter that turned the tide of air superiority with its long range and combat effectiveness. The Allied bombing campaign reached its crescendo. Strategic targets across Germany's industrial heartland burned for hours, disrupting production and crippling transportation networks. Factories could neither produce parts nor ship finished aircraft efficiently. The repercussions rippled across all branches of the German military, with tank, aircraft, and truck production plummeting dramatically. The contrast extended beyond production numbers. American bombers boasted advanced defenses, including powered turrets loaded with thousands of rounds of .50 caliber ammunition, a shield of firepower unmatched by German fighters. many of which were forced into combat with partial ammunition loads, sophisticated bomb sights, navigation systems developed by MIT scientists, and reliable radios gave American aircrews tactical advantages. German fighters often lacked such vital equipment, hampering their effectiveness. Behind this military hardware lay a dynamic feedback loop between combat experience and production. Unlike the rigid and slow German system, American designers continuously incorporated frontline insights into manufacturing changes. Modifications were implemented swiftly, with new turrets, navigation equipment, and bomb load improvements arriving within weeks of combat feedback. This agile response meant aircraft evolved rapidly to meet enemy tactics. The industrial mobilization extended beyond planes into supporting industries that powered the war machine. General Motors produced tens of thousands of aircraft engines licensed from other manufacturers, notably the Rolls-Royce Merlin engines built by Packard under license, the heart of the fastest P-51 Mustangs. Aluminum smelting soared, with output increasing sixfold, providing the essential metal needed for airframes. Chemicals critical for aviation fuel and magnesium production scaled unprecedentedly, fueling the material demands of aerial warfare. America's sprawling industrial network became a model of coordination. The War Production Board oversaw a complex matrix of over 180,000 companies, orchestrating supplies and deliveries with a precision mirrored only by factory assembly lines themselves. IBM. Punch card systems tracked components and inventory, reducing delays and bottlenecks. This vast logistical machine was a triumph of organization and foresight. Meanwhile, the enemy grew desperate. German leadership acknowledged the mounting catastrophe as their production slipped further behind Allied capabilities. Hitler's much-vaunted jet fighter program, producing the Me-262, was starved of resources, plagued by engineering challenges, and never deployed in numbers sufficient to alter the air war. Engines required frequent overhauls, and production quality was erratic. Meanwhile, new American jets like the Lockheed P-80 entered production, promising to extend Allied air superiority post-war. As Allied bombers smashed the Ruhr and other industrial regions, the destruction compounded. Transportation systems ground to a halt. Factories were isolated, and supply to front lines became a nightmare. The Luftwaffe's shrinking fighter force was spread thin, unable to defend a vast front. Losses mounted, while replacements lagged behind, turning the skies over Europe into a graveyard for Germany's hopes of air dominance. By late 1944, the scale of America's industrial output became undeniable to even the most obstinate German commanders. Hermann Göring, once dismissive and contemptuous of American capabilities, now agonized over the figures. His earlier laughter had given way to disbelief and despair. The factories once mocked now built planes and engines by the thousands, overwhelming the Luftwaffe's ability to respond. The tragic irony of the Reich's downfall was engraved in these stark numbers. In the Pacific, American industrial might demonstrated similar force. Aircraft carriers and airplanes supported island-hopping campaigns, sustained by an unbroken chain of supply stretching thousands of miles across the ocean. Transport planes moved entire airborne divisions in single days, a logistical feat that Germany's entire transport fleet could never match. This vast infrastructure, born of democratic innovation and voluntary labor, contrasted unfavorably with Axis reliance on coerced labor and inefficient resource management. The shock waves of America's production miracle reverberated well beyond the war. The workforce that had entered factories with little knowledge of aircraft manufacturing emerged as the world's most skilled aviation artisans. Assembly line workers became pioneers of automation and quality control, turning wartime technologies into post-war prosperity. The principles honed in these factories would later propel the United States into the space age and beyond. History remembers the production war as decisive. It was not superior strategy or fighting spirit alone that tipped the scales, but the unrelenting ability to produce more planes, engines, and weapons than any other nation. The United States' humble factories had become the crucible where freedom's future was forged. Their legacy remains a testament to what a united, free people can achieve when faced with existential threats.
The dawn of 1944 revealed the true extent of America's industrial might, an unstoppable force reshaping the course of World War II. The factories that once simply dreamed of meeting the impossible had begun to fulfill and then exceed the most ambitious production targets ever imagined in human history. The skies now thrummed with thousands of American aircraft, a testament to the labor, technology, and democratic spirit that powered the arsenal of democracy. The staggering output was no accident, but the culmination of years of persistent innovation and adaptation. The Ford Willow Run plant had become a symbol of industrial triumph, producing a Liberator bomber every hour. The plant's techniques, from hydraulic riveting to modular subassemblies, became the envy of the world and the nightmare of the Axis powers. Yet production alone did not win the war. The integration of the workforce, women, minorities, and workers of all backgrounds, created a vibrant industrial democracy. This social revolution transformed factories into engines of equality and excellence. Reports detailed women workers reducing defect rates and minorities mastering complex assembly tasks, proving the strength of inclusion. Meanwhile, German industry struggled under the weight of strategic bombing and internal inefficiencies. The dispersion of production to underground factories, reliant on forced labor, led to crippling delays, inferior output, and sabotage. Hitler's technological advances, including the Me-262 jet, were hampered by material shortages and production limits. The tactical superiority of German jets could not reverse the strategic tide turned by American industrial dominance. As the Allies bombed relentlessly, Germany's resources dwindled, and their air force shrank. The once mighty Luftwaffe became a shadow, unable to contend with the volumes and technological advances of American air power. On June 6, 1944, D-Day underscored the scale of American supremacy. Nearly 12,000 Allied aircraft participated, overwhelming German defenders who managed only a few hundred sorties. This colossal advantage was not by chance, but industrial calculation. The Allied aerial armada was backed by factories operating ceaselessly with precision and purpose. The human story behind these machines was as compelling as the machines themselves. Factories were filled with workers who had answered the call of history. Young teenagers, sidelined workers, and immigrants learned new trades, often transforming their lives in the process. The integration of this diverse workforce was a hallmark of the democratic war effort, contrasting deeply with the Axis reliance on brutal forced labor and oppression. In the war's waning months, the superiority of American production was undeniable. German hopes rested on miracle weapons and technological breakthroughs, but the overwhelming numbers from American factories crushed these aspirations. The final wedding of technological progress and mass production ensured the Allies' victory and shaped the post-war world order. As 1944 unfolded, the American aircraft industry reached a staggering peak, reshaping not just the course of the war, but the essence of industrial capacity worldwide. This was no longer a mere increase in output, but a transformation so profound that it redefined what nations could achieve through technology, organization, and the spirit of democracy. Factories were no longer just workplaces.
They were battlescapes where millions of ordinary Americans forged extraordinary machines. From the sprawling complexes of Boeing and Douglas to the humming assembly lines at Ford's Willow Run, production channeled raw materials into a relentless tide of fighters, bombers, and transports that darkened the skies over Europe and the Pacific. The plants operated not only at amazing scale, but with a degree of adaptability and innovation that astounded even their most seasoned engineers. Modular construction, rapid incorporation of combat modifications, and precise quality controls allowed production lines to continually improve aircraft models without halting output. This fluidity stood in stark contrast to the rigid, centralized, and fragmented German production system, which struggled to adapt under relentless Allied bombing and internal chaos. The human element was a defining feature. The mobilization drew people from every corner of society. Women who riveted wings with unparalleled accuracy. African Americans breaking barriers in factories. Immigrants who learned complex trades amidst the clatter of machinery. This collective effort was an expression of democratic strength and unity, a stark difference from the exploitative slave labor and forced conscription that characterized the Axis powers' approach. Amid this industrial onslaught, the Luftwaffe's capability rapidly deteriorated. Germany's numerical inferiority became crippling, but so did the loss of skilled pilots and the inability to replenish them. Veteran aces were irreplaceable, and training adequate new pilots required time Germany no longer had. Factory losses, bombing raids, and fuel shortages compounded this degradation. Technological marvels like the Me-262 jet fighter represented German innovation, but their limited numbers, mechanical unreliability, and lack of resources rendered them too little, too late. Meanwhile, American factories seamlessly integrated newer technologies into aircraft production and even pioneered the early jet fighters that would dominate post-war skies. The strategic bombing campaign decimated German industry's heart. Key industrial centers lay in ruins. Transport networks were severed, significantly hampering production and distribution. Despite hysteria and propaganda efforts, German morale waned as factories and cities burned. June 6, 1944, D-Day, was a testament to this overwhelming power. The sheer volume of Allied aircraft participants, nearly 12,000, swooped over Normandy, erasing any chance for the defenseless German forces to mount effective air resistance. The air supremacy achieved through industrial might was a cornerstone of the successful amphibious invasion that would turn the tide unmistakably in the Allies' favor. Beyond metrics and machines lay a profound social transformation. The war effort bonded a diverse workforce into a nation united by purpose. Older adults, teenagers, women, minorities, many of whom had faced systemic discrimination, became essential cogs in the war machinery. This wartime solidarity sowed seeds for future social change and set a precedent for civil rights activism in decades to come. By the final year of the war, the scale of American output was unparalleled. Germany's hopes rested on Wunderwaffen, miracle weapons designed to stem the tide. But the numerical and qualitative advantage the United States and its allies built was insurmountable. By late 1944, the magnitude of America's industrial output had firmly cemented its place as the decisive factor in the Allied victory. The relentless cascade of aircraft, engines, ammunition, and supporting materials produced daily was unlike anything ever witnessed in the annals of war. American factories were not just churning out machines. They were orchestrating a symphony of production, innovation, and human effort that transformed the nature of conflict itself. The German war machine, which had once marched unchallenged across Europe,
was gasping under the strain of overwhelming American and Allied material superiority. While Germany poured significant resources into technological advancements such as the Me-262 jet fighter and the M-262 jet-powered aircraft, their efforts were thwarted by production limits, scarcity of critical materials, and relentless Allied bombing campaigns that targeted factories and transportation hubs. The Nazis attempted to relocate production to underground facilities and dispersed complexes, often manned by forced labor under brutal conditions. But these efforts failed to match the efficiency and scale of American industry. American factories, from Boeing's expansive Seattle plant to the Douglas facilities and Lockheed's sprawling complexes, were producing fighters, bombers, and transports in numbers that eclipsed the entire Axis output. The ability to rapidly implement changes based on combat experience, such as adding chin turrets for better bomber defense or upgrading navigation and targeting technologies, meant Allied aircraft were not only numerous but continuously improving. The feedback loop between frontline pilots and factory engineers was unmatched and critical to sustaining air superiority. The human dimension of this industrial miracle was equally significant. Factories bustled with a spectacularly diverse workforce. Women riveted planes with remarkable precision. African Americans, Mexican Americans, and Native Americans contributed indispensable skills. Teenagers and older citizens alike joined the production lines. This unprecedented mobilization defied outdated prejudices and highlighted the inherent strengths of a democratic society committed to common purpose. Such inclusion was in sharp contrast to the forced labor systems and racial ideologies underpinning the Axis war effort, which often sapped the morale and efficiency of their own production. The overwhelming weight of American production manifested in the skies and on the beaches during critical moments such as the Normandy invasion. On D-Day, over 11,000 Allied aircraft provided near-total air supremacy, a feat made possible only by sustained industrial productivity across multiple decades of innovation and labor. German pilots, though brave and skilled, found themselves outmatched and outnumbered, unable to stem the flood of bombers, fighters, and transports. By 1945, the tide was irreversible. The U.S. had produced nearly 300,000 military aircraft during the war, dwarfing German production figures and creating an industrial landscape that could sustain prolonged conflict on multiple fronts. The factories that had once seemed an afterthought were now recognized as the heart of Allied strength. The legacy of this vast production effort extended beyond military victory. The skills, technologies, and organizational systems developed during the war laid the foundation for post-war economic prosperity and technological advancement, propelling America into a position of global leadership. Moreover, the societal changes accelerated by this industrial mobilization, especially the expanded roles of women and minorities in the workforce, would sow seeds for future civil rights movements and a reshaped social order. As the guns fell silent, the lessons of America's production miracle echoed loudly. The defeat of tyranny was not merely a result of battlefield valor, but a triumph of collective ingenuity, democratic cooperation, and the unstoppable force of mass production. Germany's failure to recognize and counter this industrial power had sealed its fate long before the final battles were fought. By 1945, the staggering pace of American industrial production had become an irreversible force shaping the final stages of World War II. The factories that had once cautiously embarked on retooling automobile plants now operated at night and day, forging an endless stream of aircraft that overwhelmed Axis capabilities. The logistical complexity was immense, yet orchestrated with an efficiency that redefined manufacturing worldwide. Ford's Willow Run factory stood as the crown jewel of this effort. By April 1944, it achieved a remarkable milestone, producing a B-24 Liberator bomber every 63 minutes. This factory alone could outproduce the entire German bomber fleet, an astonishing superiority that directly influenced the air war's outcome. Willow Run's innovative assembly methods, modular subassemblies, hydraulic riveting, and facility decentralization became a model replicated across the country, enabling peak production while managing thousands of design changes responding to combat realities. The human spirit electrified these efforts. Some 310,000 women joined the aircraft industry, accounting for nearly two-thirds of the workforce by 1943. Women like Roswell Monroe, renowned for her precision riveting, embodied this transformation. Factories adapted tools and workstations to fit their contributions, which not only ensured quality, but increased overall productivity. This broad inclusion extended beyond gender. African Americans, Mexican Americans, Native Americans, and immigrants all found vital roles, unified in a common mission proving democracy's unique strength in mass mobilization. American innovation was relentless. Leaders in aviation advancements continually refined designs and production techniques. For example, Boeing's Seattle plant produced 16 B-17 Flying Fortresses daily by mid-1944. Douglas Aircraft swelled to 167,000 employees, producing various bombers and transports. Lockheed manufactured P-38 Lightnings with remarkable speed, turning one out every 90 minutes while implementing thousands of combat-driven modifications. North American Aviation rolled out 500 P-51 Mustangs monthly, aircraft that gave Allied pilots the range and firepower to dominate enemy skies. Contrasted with this, German production struggled under the strain of relentless Allied bombing campaigns and inefficient labor practices. The Nazi response, shifting production underground using slave labor, proved disastrous. Poor conditions, sabotage, and logistical challenges caused production delays and quality collapse, undermining any technological edge Germany hoped to leverage. For instance, the revolutionary Me-262 jet fighter, faster than any Allied plane, was produced in insufficient numbers plagued by mechanical failures and limited operational use. Strategic bombing devastated Germany's industrial heartland. Oil refineries, factories, transportation networks, and supply lines were crippled. Albert Speer, Germany's armaments minister, conceded that the loss of aviation gasoline and synthetic oil sharply limited German war capabilities. The Allies' ability to consistently disrupt production and supply ensured that many German aircraft never left the factories or were grounded due to fuel shortages. On June 6, 1944, the power of American production was demonstrated dramatically during the Normandy landings. Nearly 12,000 Allied aircraft supported the invasion, a force overwhelming the German defenders, who could muster only a few hundred sorties. This immense air superiority reduced the threat to the invasion fleet and troops, proving how industrial output directly impacted battlefield success. Furthermore, the integration of technology and production created a feedback system unparalleled in warfare history. Innovations from frontline experiences were rapidly incorporated into manufacturing processes. Engineering modifications could be tested and implemented across multiple plants swiftly, ensuring aircraft evolved with combat conditions. In the end, American industrial power was more than the sum of machinery and factories. It was a testament to a democratic nation's resilience and unity under fire. The diverse workforce's dedication and innovation created a production miracle that not only defeated tyranny, but reshaped global industry for decades to come. As 1945 dawned, the full magnitude of the Allied production machine was unmistakable. The United States alone was producing aircraft at a pace that seemed unimaginable just 5 years earlier. This industrial might was not merely about numbers. It was about a coordinated, relentless flow of innovation, labor, and resources that created a sustainable and adaptable war engine. Each plane that took to the skies carried the imprint of a nation united in purpose, transforming the American industrial landscape into the arsenal that secured victory. By this time, nearly 300,000 military aircraft had been produced by American factories. This production dwarfed Germany's total wartime output, underscoring the vast industrial gulf. The legendary plants of Boeing, Ford, Douglas, North American Aviation, Lockheed, and others did more than build airplanes. They pioneered methodologies in mass production, quality control, and workforce diversification that would become the template for peacetime industry and aerospace supremacy. The historical, symbolic weight of the Willow Run bomber plant remained profound. It wasn't just the factory's unprecedented output, one bomber every hour at peak, but its embodiment of American innovation overcoming initial failures, aligning thousands into an extraordinary cooperative system. The thousands of workers, from newly trained immigrant women to skilled machinists, contributed to an industrial revolution that transcended wartime necessity. Simultaneously, the technological edge gained by rapid integration of combat experience was decisive. Valuable feedback from the front helped refine aircraft with improved defensive armament, navigation, and bombing accuracy. This rapid adaptation contrasted sharply with German aircraft programs, which suffered from static designs and slow production cycles. As Germany faced relentless air assault and material shortages, its attempts at technological breakthroughs, such as the jet-powered Me-262 or the rocket-powered Me-163, while impressive conceptually, came too late and in too few numbers to stem the tide. German reliance on slave labor and dispersed underground factories suffered from sabotage, poor conditions, and disunity, failings which only deepened the industrial gap between Axis and Allies. On the battlefield, the consequences were clear. Allied air forces dominated the skies, escorting bombing runs deep into Germany and supporting ground operations with overwhelming firepower and tactical flexibility. German pilots, often flying older aircraft with limited ammunition and fuel, were outnumbered and outmatched. Attrition of skilled pilots and aircraft combined with dwindling resources sealed the fate of the Luftwaffe. The social impact back home loomed large. The war effort transformed American society, challenging preconceived social norms by creating inclusive work environments that welcomed women, minorities, and the previously marginalized. This mobilization sowed the seeds for post-war civil rights advances and economic growth, as wartime skills transitioned into peacetime opportunity. The factories and foundries that built bombers would soon power consumer industries. The story of American aircraft production during World War II is not only a tale of astonishing industrial achievement, but also a profound reflection on the power of democracy, innovation, and human will. From the modest beginnings in 1940, when the United States produced fewer than 4,000 military planes, to the apex of nearly 100,000 aircraft produced in 1944 alone, the journey was marked by determination, creativity, and collective sacrifice. At the heart of this transformation was the belief that no challenge was insurmountable, that a free and united people could overcome any obstacle, including the unprecedented demands of total war. The factories that sprang up, the workers who mastered new skills, and the systems that tracked complex supply chains were each part of a vast, intricate machine that didn't simply build planes, but built hope, security, and the foundations of a new world order. The human faces behind this epic tale were as varied as the aircraft they assembled. Women who had never riveted a wing before became experts. Immigrants, teenagers, African Americans, Native Americans, and men from farms and cities alike answered the call, turning their labor into liberty. Their work rippled far beyond the assembly lines, invigorating civil rights movements and setting the stage for America's post-war economic boom. Technological progress, coupled with unprecedented production scale, made victory inevitable. While Germany clung to despairing hopes in miracle weapons, fighters like the famed Me-262 jets, America's factories delivered thousands of tried and tested bombers, fighters, and transports that dominated the air with reliable superiority. The speed with which American industry adapted, incorporating combat feedback to improve designs rapidly, contrasted sharply with the rigidity and inefficiency of Axis production. The strategic bombing campaigns that devastated the German war machine also symbolized the potency of America's industrial growth. Cities, factories, fuel supplies, and transportation networks were crippled by relentless aerial assaults, made possible by the incredible production that sustained massive bombing fleets year after year. The sheer volume of aircraft renewed and reinforced air dominance on both European and Pacific fronts, enabling pivotal victories that hastened the end of the war. The legacy of this industrial triumph cannot be overstated. It showed the world that democratic societies, when mobilized with vision and unity, could achieve the impossible. The principles forged amidst the challenges of wartime production, mass production techniques, quality control innovations, workforce diversification, and government-industry collaboration, would shape manufacturing long after the guns fell silent. Hermann Göring's dismissive laughter in 1940, mocking the idea that America could produce 50,000 planes annually, ultimately became a haunting symbol of miscalculation and hubris. By war's end, the factories that German leadership had so scorned had produced nearly 3 times that number. The American production miracle not only won the war, but ushered in the American century, a world shaped not just by weapons, but by industry, innovation, and freedom. The aircraft that rolled off those assembly lines were more than machines. They were democracy's answer to tyranny. They embodied the sweat and hope of a population united in a common cause, proving that strength lies not in oppression, but in the collective power of free people working together. This grand mobilization reshaped history, proving that the might of a nation is measured as much by its factories as by its armies. In the final analysis, the production war was the true decisive front. The Allies won because they outproduced, out-innovated, and outlasted their enemies. The sky above was shaped by the factories below, and the iconic B-24s, P-51s, and countless other aircraft remain lasting symbols of a nation that met the moment and changed the world forever.